Hello. Just so we're clear, it was Rob who's going to be, or James who's going to be presenting later, who was saying how handsome he was. It wasn't me. Anyway, thanks for having me here today. I'm going to talk about social media and some of the trends that we're seeing and how companies are leveraging social media today. Before we get started, though, with sort of the trends that we're seeing, I wanted to start and just give a little perspective about consumers in general and what we're seeing. Maybe? After we solve this. Great, thank you. So what we know is that consumers are on a journey, on a personal journey to fulfill both their needs and aspirations. And this journey happens in the context of society, economy, and culture. And so what this means for us is that with more and more connections that people have and interactions with each other via technology, that we really need to stop and understand how we can engage with people in a way that's consistent with their behaviors that are changing dramatically in this sort of digital, socially connected world that we live in today. And as a result of that, as Valerie said, we have to focus on humans, or the people, and not the tools, and really start to think about how we interact and engage with consumers over time. And when we talk about this, this really starts with the concept of listening. When we talk about listening today, as we know, the social web, there's millions of conversations that are taking place every day. Many great conversations about brands and the brands that we work for, which is fantastic. They become a permanent record, all the nice things people say about us. But at the same time, when people talk negatively about our brands, those start to go through the internet very quickly as well and have an impact on people and how they think about us. So by way of example, when I was first planning my trip here to Istanbul, it was recommended that I stay at the Hilton, so I went online using our social media tools and started looking at what people were saying. Now the good news is, people were talking about what an amazing staff they had. They were talking about how it's just a home away from home. And they're also saying, wow, this is one of the best experiences that I've ever had. It sounds like a great place to stay, right? Unfortunately, at the same time, we were also hearing people say, this is the worst experience ever. The worst 24 hours of my life, and never again. So what this demonstrates or illustrates is that there's lots of conversations that are happening, and what's really critical for us as researchers is to help understand what these mean. So most of us today think about the concept of social media monitoring, which is how we go online, we use tools like a Radiant 6 or a dashboard to help us look at what people are saying, the sentiment. And really all this helps us understand is what we just showed you, that people are saying good things, people are saying bad things. But it really doesn't help us understand the why. So the trend that we're really seeing today is this concept of not monitoring, but really moving towards this concept of what we talk about as social listening. Now, the first phase of social listening is, in fact, the identification and gathering of this information online. But it's how do we take it and really start to move it past that? How do we start to overlay these qualitative measures? How do we look at the information and help our clients understand what it means? The things that are positive, the things that we can change. Also being able to help analyze and interpret the information. As we all know, it's very critical when we're looking at data, especially qualitative data like we're seeing on the web, to be able to understand what it means, to be able to understand what it means in context of our business needs, and then to be able to help report back and give us strategies about what we need to do based upon that. So as opposed to having dashboards and information that we've seen, where we've seen sentiment or we're starting to track comments, when you start talking about this trend towards social listening, you're really starting to see, again, a much clearer picture of what this means. So this is an example of an in-store experience for a major retailer in Germany. And you can see here sort of the positives and negatives. You can really start to understand what it is. In the middle here, you can see that very controversial is this in-store experience. Now, also when you start to look at social listening, not only can we understand what's important, but we can also really start to take this and look at the journey. Look at what kinds of things people are talking about along the way. The catalogs, pre-store, the in-store experience, the food, the different things that are happening within this experience, and all the comments that help support that and help us understand what's important to these consumers. My favorite here is that it talks about the experience sort of post-purchase, and it says that everyone, before they get married, should build one of their bookcases with their prospective spouse to make sure that once they're done, they're still friends. But anyway, this is the type of thing that we're starting to see. We're starting to really understand how we can take listening and move it from, again, a monitoring where we're just understanding the quantitative things, but really to start to understand the why, understand the context behind it and what's important. But what we also know is that listening is not enough. And what we mean by that is we really start to need to think about consumers online. We talked about how we engage with them. But what do we know? What do we know about consumers? We know that content is incredibly important to them. We know they like to go online. They like to be able to share, go to social networks, look at blogs. It's becoming a very important part of their life. Then we ask ourselves, well, what do brands want? What's important to them? How can brands help really drive disproportionate growth? And we know that from this perspective that it's really about how brands can build relationships, how they can start to have familiarity with those individuals, how they can start to get involvement, how they can involve their consumers in the decision-making process. We see lots of brands today with their Facebook pages or their Twitter feeds trying to engage consumers to come in and be a part of the everyday aspects of their brand. Starting to create value. What kinds of things can I give back to my consumers to make this important? And then last but not least, this concept of loyalty. And we all know this is sort of the holy grail. How can we get our consumers to become loyal? So given those two facts that we know that people come online and want to get content and want to be social, want to interact with each other, and we know that brands are looking to really drive loyalty and engagement with their consumers, the question becomes, what's the opportunity for us as researchers? And we see that opportunity really being this concept of creating what we define as engagement-based communities. And these aren't communities or community panels where you have individuals that are part of a group that are taking surveys. These aren't qualitative immersions that are taking place over a day or two. These are much different. These communities focus on two things. They focus on the brand providing content that we talked about and the ability for their consumers or the people to share information. And it also gets the brand relationship, where the brand's actually starting to interact with consumers. And if we can do that, we can help drive both of these things. We can drive engagement with our consumers, but equally important, we can really start to drive the brand loyalty. We can start to have the individuals and the brands working together, co-creating, developing products, creating demand around those. This is an example of what when we talk about an engagement-based community, the types of things that you'll see. You'll see, again, it's very focused on visual cues around how we can bring blogs, how we can bring the brands into the discussions. These are moderated by individuals to make sure that the communications and the interactions feel like they're very natural with the brand. You'll start to see the different types of activities that we're encouraging people to come and be a part of. And unlike a lot of the research that we do today that's point in time, these provide us the ability to start interacting with these consumers over time, really starting to understand what things are important to them, really starting to understand when there's changes in trends, and really be able to give us a perspective about where the world's going. The 4 pillars that we talk about most, or that we hear most from our clients when we talk about this concept of engagement-based communities, is the opportunity to listen. And as again, we started this today talking about how important it is to listen to our customers. As we all know in research, our research is only as good as the questions that we ask. So being able to listen to our customers, being able to understand what's important to them, being able to ask the right questions is at the heart of what we do. The next pillar is the ability to ask questions. We want to absolutely have the ability to have discussions with our consumers. But not necessarily in the same way that we've done in the past. Not necessarily in long surveys. Because again, people are changing. What they want is changing. We talked about the changing consumer, the things that they're looking for. So again, we're trying to focus on consumer interactions, ways that we can engage with consumers that are exciting to them, that want to bring them into the process, and discuss. So again, not having a linear experience, but allowing consumers not just to talk to the brand, but to talk to each other. And what we continue to find is that a great, great majority of the value that these types of communities deliver is based upon the fact that that we can listen. And then finally, co-creation. And this is a really amazing thing for us to start to see, and I think we're still at the very early stages, but we're seeing the adoption of this very quickly, which is where brands are really now starting to work in the very early stages, not just of product development, but on advertising campaigns and all kinds of other things that are related to the brand. And while we don't talk a lot about building advocacy within research today, one of the other great things is that when you start to build these types of programs or products with your clients, they inherently become loyal, they feel a part of it, and most importantly can start taking these concepts and ideas out to market and creating demand for what we're bringing. So the big takeaway for us is the member-to-member interaction where we stimulate these conversations, where we start to build trust, where we really start to deliver richer insights, is really the trend that we're seeing today within the community space. We're moving away from linear panels, where we're just giving survey questions or asking, but we're really starting to engage the consumer. We're really starting to bring the consumer voice into the company on a daily basis. As we all know, there's hundreds of decisions every week that companies make without having the ability to go out and do traditional research or really sometimes talk to anyone. These environments give companies the ability to come back and ask questions and literally almost in real time, within 24 or 48 hours, starting to get a good sense about what their consumers are thinking. So many of you who have been around and in the community space have always heard people talking about what we would consider these long-term social spaces. There's our communities that are ongoing, that sometimes last for 6 months, a year. Sometimes we have many communities we run today that last for many years. But we also start to see the concept of idea spaces, which are short-term communities. And especially in Europe, this is a trend that we're seeing happening very, very, very quickly. We're seeing brands that are looking at a particular product release or a campaign, starting to use the same concepts of bringing these individuals together and being able to have them interacting with one another and listening and doing that. And finally, the other trend that we're seeing is we're starting to see this concept of fan spaces, where we've had brands that have already built very successful online communities on Facebook or Twitter or other places, and how can we go into those environments and leverage them to ask questions. So this is an example of how on a Facebook page, we now have the ability to start to bring these types of events right into the page and start to take the same types of activities you might do on an online community and bring them into an existing environment. This is something that we've been doing a lot of work around over the last 6 months. We see more and more companies talking about how they want to leverage these existing assets, and we definitely think that it will be a significant trend in the future. So the last thing I'd like to share with you today before I leave is an example of what this means. I know it's easy to talk about the whole idea of, yes, we want to engage consumers, how important it is, what it can do for the brand. but I think that being able to share this example hopefully will really bring this to life for you. So today, Condé Nast, one of the biggest magazine publishers in the world, that publishes Vogue and Allure and many others, they've run a community of 2,000 of what they would say their best consumers or best readers. And they work with that group all the time. They work with that group to understand the content that they want to put in their magazines. They work with them on behalf of their advertisers to help understand how their advertisers can be more successful. And most recently, they did a program where they were trying to understand more about the products for one of their advertisers. And what they decided to do was to take a group from the Condé Nast Style Society and provide them with actual product. When they received this product, the feedback that they got from all of the individuals was that, wow, this is really fantastic. They liked the products, they really understood it, but what the most important thing they learned from these women was that the kind of advertising that impacted them most was hearing from other women. Hearing from other women like themselves, what things worked, what products were successful. And Condé Nast and their advertising partner really took this to heart. And as a result of this, as a result of engaging with these women, as a result of understanding what was important to them, they actually went and created an entire campaign that was launched in 4 of the Condé Nast publications using real women from the community. So this is the actual pages from the book where Condé Nast went through, and now you've seen them develop feedback from these women, get product feedback about what things are most important to them, and they've now taken this and they've translated it into advertisements that appeared in 4 of their major publications across the world. So this is a great example of how Condé Nast engaged with their customers, not only to develop ideas and products around advertising, but also to really engage and build relationships with their customers and to be able to demonstrate to them the power that they have, literally putting them in their magazines as part of their advertising campaigns. So I just want to leave you with the thought that the trends that we're seeing are really around this concept of engagement, really around the idea of how do we get people to come and engage with our brands, how do we start to think differently about the types of involvement that we have with consumers, with people today, and how do we bring them and their voice into our organizations in a continuous manner so we can make the best decisions possible. Thank you.